Hi Devon, so we are now on lesson 15, writing fractions as decimals. Okay, so our in focus task says, how do we write these fractions as decimals? See if you can read these fractions out loud. If you're able to read these fractions, you should be able to have a little think of 100 square and think how you would write these fractions as a decimal. Think about what you've learnt to do with tenths, think about what you've learnt to do with hundredths, and see if you can use that to answer the in focus task. Pause the video now whilst you give that a go. Okay, let's have a look at our let's learn. So, 1/2 is equal to what as a decimal? We have method 1, where they've used 100 square and they've coloured in 5 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We know that on 100 square a whole row equals 10. Okay, if this 100 square represents one whole and we coloured in half, we would colour in 5 rows. Okay, because 10 tens equal a whole, or 10 tenths equal a whole. Okay, so if we coloured in 5, that means we've coloured in 5 tenths. Each row is representative of 1/10. Okay, if this is a whole. So 1/2 equals 5 tenths, as we can see coloured in here. Or there's a method 2. We know that it's a half. So if we multiply the bottom by 5 to get us to 10, we have to do the same to the top. So we're going to do 1 times 5 equals 5. So we'd have 5 tenths, which is written 5 over 10. And if we were to colour in 5 tenths, we know that it's a half. How do we write 5 tenths as a decimal? 5 tenths is written as 0.5, knowing that this is our tenths column and this is our ones. Okay, so 0.5 is equal to a half. Okay, as we can see explained there. So there's 2 methods. You could colour in your 100 square, or you can use the multiplication method where you multiply the bottom to make 10 and you multiply by the same number on top. Okay, and then you convert using your knowledge of tenths and hundredths into a decimal. Okay, let's have a look at a quarter. So once again, we've got 100 square. Okay, this is representative of one whole. So if we were to colour in a quarter, well, we knew that 5 rows equals 5 tenths. Okay, and that was half. So if we want to colour in a quarter, we have to colour in a half of a half. So they've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows again, but only of 5. Okay, so altogether they've coloured in a quarter of the 100 square, and that means they've coloured in 25 squares. Not 25 rows, but 25 squares. So each of these tiny squares are not worth a tenth, because we know that a row is worth a tenth. Each tiny square is worth a hundredth. So we've coloured in 25 hundredths. Okay, and we know that we write 25 hundredths as 0.25, having 2 tenths and 5 hundredths equals 25 hundredths. Okay, or there's method 2. So we've got a quarter and we've got 100 squares in the middle. So what do we have to do to 4 to get to 100? What do we have to multiply it by? It's 25. Okay, because we've got 4 groups of 25 equals 100. Okay, so that means we have to multiply the top by 25. 1 times 25 equals 25 hundredths. okay, which we know we write as 0.25. So there's two methods here. Let's have a look at our last one, 3/4. We've got our 100 square. We know that 1/4 was 25, and now we need to do 3/4. So we've got 25, 25, and 25. 25 by 25 by 25 equals 75 tiny little hundredths coloured in, which is written as 0.75. Okay, 7/10 and 5 hundredths equals 75 hundredths. Method 2. We've got 3/4 and we need to multiply 4 again to get to 100, which we know is by 25. We need 4 groups of 25 to get to 100. So we multiply the top by 25 as well. 3 groups of 25 equals 75 hundredths. As a decimal, 0.75. Okay. So number 4, let's have a look. 1/2 equals how many tenths and how many hundredths. So they've represented it in a different way here. We still have our 100 square and they've cut it in half. It's the same as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows, and we know that each row is worth a tenth. So 1/2 is the same as 5 tenths, 0.5, or 50 hundredths, 50 of these tiny little hundredths, okay, which is written as 0.50. So we've got 5 tenths or 50 hundredths. They're both the same as 1/2, as you can see by the colouring in. They're just split into different size parts. So Holly says, it is not necessary to write the 0 in the hundredths place. He says, why not? See if you can have a think about that one. Do we need to put the 0 in the hundredths place? So we don't actually need to put a 0 in the hundredths place because we know that 5 tenths is 50 hundredths. Okay, we know 5 times 10 equals 50. Okay, so we know if there's not a digit there in our hundredths column, then it's a 0. Right, time for some guided practice. Let's have a little read through. So we have number 1. 1/2 can be written as tenths. So 1/2 equals how many tenths, and then write it as a decimal. Suggest another fraction that can be written as tenths. Number 2, 1/4 and 3/4 can be written as hundredths. Okay, so you need to fill in the gaps and write it as a decimal, and then suggest another fraction that can be written as hundredths. And number 3, I would like you to write each quantity in decimals. Okay, so you need to work out what it would be in hundredths or tenths. So pause the video there whilst you have a go at that. Right, so let's have a look. Let me get my whiteboard. Number 1. Number 1. 1/2 is the same as 5 tenths, because we know that 5 is half of 10. Or it can be written as 0.5. Okay, because we write 5 tenths as 0.5. Suggest another fraction that can be written as tenths. So let's have a look. Another fraction that we could write as tenths in rows. I think we could write 1/5. So 1/5 of this shape would be 2 rows. Another 2 rows, another 2 rows, another 2 rows, another 2 rows. So we need 5 groups of 20 equals 100. So a 1/5 is 2 rows. So if a 1/5 is equal to 2 rows, how many tenths is that? 2/10. How do we write 2/10 as a decimal? 0.2. Okay, that was a bit of a tricky one, but we should have been able to do this conversion once I gave you the 1/5. Okay, question 2. 1/4 equals 25 hundredths. And how do we write that as a decimal? 0.25. And 3/4 equals 75 hundredths. And as a decimal, that is 0.75. Okay. Then it says suggest another fraction which can be written as hundredths. This one actually is quite easy. We can write a half as hundredths. So what would that be? What's a half in hundredths? 50 hundredths, which as a decimal is 0.5. Okay, you could put the 0 on the end, but as we said previously, we don't need that. Okay. So, question 3, write each quantity as decimals. Let's have a look. So we've got A, we've got 1 and 3/4 meters. As a decimal, we know we've got 1 whole, so in our ones column we'd have 1. Then we've got our decimal point, then we've got our tenths and our hundredths. 3/4. 3/4, we've just done that as hundredths, so it would be 1.75, unit of measurement on the end, meters. B, we have 8.5 kilograms. So we know we've got 8 wholes, so that goes in our ones column, our decimal point, and half. We know that a half is a 5, okay? If you put in a 0 there, that's fine, but you don't need it. Your unit of measurement on the end, 8.5 kilograms. And lastly, we've got 5 pounds and a quarter, which sounds a bit bizarre. So we know we've got 5 whole pounds, that goes in our ones column, and then a quarter. How did we write a quarter? 25. Okay, and because it's in money, you put your pound sign on the end. Okay, £5 25 pence. Okay, this is a little bit tricky, but remember to use your 100 grids, knowing that one row is a tenth and one of the little squares is a hundredth. Okay, and then one whole square is one whole. It might be useful if you can go online and see if you can print some 100 squares for you to colour in, okay, as you're doing your worksheet, if you find that useful. So now it's time for you to go on to worksheet 15 attached to the Google Classroom, pages 29 and 30. Please, if you do have any questions or you get a little bit stuck, send a private message to your teacher or write on your stream, okay, because we're all here to help each other out. Good luck, everyone.